your regular fix of the best guests from the world of data and analytics. This is The Data Mix with Brian Bouden and George Beaton.
Brian.
George.
We're back. High five.
Oh gosh, I'm out of practice. I'm this way though. It's always the opposite, right? Yeah. Nice one, man. Good to see you. How are you?
Pretty good. Thank you. I was up early this morning. It was a 4:30 start to go from my cold, wet home in Scotland down to London, the big smoke, as we call it.
Yeah. I think we should have like a Where's Wally, Guess Where George Is type of segment as well, because like you're never in the same place twice, mate. But it's always a pleasure to have you here. No 4 a.m. journeys for me, but I do have a plumber downstairs fixing the kitchen sink, so it never stops in the world of data and everything else, right?
Okay, so if we hear some plumbing noises going on, we'll know what it is.
We'll just ignore them and move on. We have something much more exciting than office spaces and plumbing today, though, right?
Oh, yes, we do. This is one I've been looking forward to for a while.
I mean, look, I know we do say that, but I think this one's like kind of cool. We're really excited that it's happening. Obviously, more to come. We've got Ben Rogojan here, Seattle data guy. And if you don't know who he is, you're going to find out very, very shortly. We're going to bring him on. But we have a few things just to take on first, George, right? So
yes, we
as
do.
has become customary, we love your support, guys. Thank you so much for everything that you do for the show, attending and giving us questions and putting stuff in the chat, downloading us. Please rate our show, okay? For us to be able to bring all these guests to you, we work hard at it. And frankly, I think we deserve 5-star reviews, right? Let's just not hide behind that barrier anymore. Just give us the 5-star.
I agree.
And then we don't have to hassle you anymore for it in person. I mean, we'll still do it on the show, but we won't do it in person anymore. So zap the Spotify and the Apple. They're the ones that make the big difference for us, or sub us on YouTube as well if you've enjoyed rewatching the show back. We appreciate you. Big plug over. This is the segment of the show that's coming up that we call the Data Fix, George, right? And let's get rocking and rolling here. Are you ready for us?
I sure am.
All right, let's go for it.
Play that jingle.
We're heading into the Data Fix. Here we go. So we always give a little bit of analysis on what's happening in tech. And this is George's segment. And George, you've got a good one this week, right? I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah, so I want to talk this week about how politicized technology is becoming. So I was listening to some of my favorite technology podcasts. It wasn't this one. It was one of the other ones I like to listen to. There's a couple of announcements over the past couple of weeks around diversity, equity, and inclusion programs within big tech companies. So these are companies like Amazon, like Meta, who are either canceling them or at the very least reviewing them because they have got too woke. And too politicized, as they say, which I think there's some deep irony there. I'm going to go back to possibly before a lot of our listeners and viewers were born, back to 2020. Do you remember that far back, Brian?
Oh gosh, there was like pandemic somewhere around there.
Yes, well, exactly. Yeah. So back then there was a chap called Brian Armstrong. Brian Armstrong he may still be the CEO of Coinbase. And back then he wrote this, what became fairly famous blog post around mission focused. So that was basically, he felt back then in 2020, technology was getting too politicized. And therefore he said, okay, we're going to focus on what we do best, technology, and we're going to ignore politics. Well, fast forward a couple of years, Mark Zuckerberg appeared on Joe Rogan's show in 2022, talking about how he was trying to walk a narrow path. He was trying to be the arbiter of the truth on the internet. Fast forward a couple more years, and Mark's back, really lambasting the Biden administration, talking about how they'd been shackled, they'd been shouted at down the phone by government officials, telling them to take things down. And the other thing that sort of jumps out at me is that at the beginning, just before Zuck went onto Rogan's podcast, Donald Trump held a bit of a summit at Mar-a-Lago with everybody who's anybody in the tech industry. Right after that, it was very obvious, I think, that there was a realignment within the tech industry of where their values now currently lie.
I think you can see me shaking my head, right? And it's not at what's happened. It's not at the inevitability of it all. It's just at the fact that things are changing, right? And regardless of your political views, that correlation is extremely obvious about what is happening in the US tech sector. And it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary, the amount of power that is available from different angles, if you know what I mean.
Especially with the advent of AI and the how that can be jumped on by any government to their own ends. Mm-hmm. So it's one to watch. It's definitely one to watch.
And that is a burning situation as we move towards administrative handover. Shall we say it that way? Which is not far away now as well.
Say it that way. But it's happening here as well. I don't want to labour the point, but I think it was just yesterday that our Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that he was going to make the UK an AI superpower, and starting to throw money at that, except there's been quite a few tech analysts that have come out and said, well, wait a minute, you don't even have the power infrastructure to support what you're talking about. Have you really thought this through?
I do think that it was an extremely flippant media bite comment that like we're going to use AI to power Great Britain or the United Kingdom. You know, it's one of those things that you just say and you're like, oh, right, how should I actually do that? So again, that we could probably go for a different segment, right? But we're right up on time now, George. So any sort of closing thoughts there, or are we in a good place with our observations?
Really just watch how the political sands are moving over time, and how they're moving the tech industry, because the tech industry is very much going to be influenced by politics over the next couple of years.
Well, it's fascinating stuff. Thank you, mate. I really appreciate that. That was the Data Fix segment of our show here. And often I don't know what he's going to talk about until we get on the show. So appreciate it, man.
Whatever's happening in the news, but it's always bang up to date.
Yeah, we are here. But although, the Data Fix is always going to be here, that's an omnipresent, but not everything is omnipresent, including our guest today. So let's get him on. We're delighted to have Ben here. Let's see if we can get all the tech working. Hey, Ben, how are you?
Hey, Ben.
Hello.
Yeah, we've got you down here, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Up and down and left and right. Boom, boom. How are you, my friend?
I'm well. How about yourself?
It's good stuff. No, it's great. I think we've got a bit of time zone adjustment for you, right? Because I don't know what time it must be. Are you on West Coast?
I'm on Mountain Time, so it's 8. It's a little past 8.
Yeah. Okay. Not too bad. Not too bad. Well, look, it's great to have you here, and it was fab to actually chat to you a few weeks ago as well, and to talk and we're going to talk about a lot of things, right? But why don't you just give like a pretty short intro about yourself and just say hello, and we'll jump into the recording here and let everyone know what we've been talking about.
Yeah, of course. Hey there, everyone. My name is Ben Rogojan, aka the Seattle Data Guy. I think a lot of people know me because I put out a ton of content on data engineering, data infrastructure, You can often find it either on Substack here or on YouTube. But in my day-to-day, I consult and help companies set up their data infrastructure and kind of figure out how to get the full value from data, fix whatever processes might be needing to get fixed, so you can do more than just have a bunch of cool tools, but you can also actually change how the business operates.
Mm-hmm. And data engineering means a lot of things nowadays, Ben, right? And I think that we're going to talk about some of those things during the call as well. So, for everyone that's here watching live, thank you very much. And we're gonna run our interview now. We are all like right here in the background, and we'll be taking questions like live from the chat at the end as well if you have any. So feel free to pop something in the chat. And enjoy, George. Anything from you before we head into the interview?
I'm looking forward to this. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago that we recorded this, and I do often say that this is one I'm looking forward to, but we don't often get into the weeds and into the sort of deep down technical details, and I think we did here, and I think that's super important in the world of data engineering, because we can see the results, but we need to understand what is powering these results. So for that, this was a really interesting one for me anyway.
Mm-hmm. And I think I mentioned this before on the pre-show, but I think the most important thing of this whole interview is my continuity. I seem to be wearing the same thing that I did on the day of the interview. So that says one of two things about me, and I'll let you decide what those things are. So we're going to run now. We'll see you guys in about half an hour. Look, enjoy the interview, and we'll see you then.
See you.
Okay, everyone, we're very excited for you all to be here for another episode of the Data Mix. I'm Brian. Over there is that way. George, yeah. Hey, George. And, as mentioned earlier, down the bottom, we've got Ben. Hey, Ben. How are you?
Hey, hello.
Hey, Ben.
It's nice to have you here, man. How are you?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we were just talking about the contrasting lighting that we have going on here. We're all having our own struggles at different levels, right? So
yeah, yes. Different sides of the world, different times.
Different sides. Where are you, Ben?
Denver.
Oh, Denver. So we'll have to talk about the Seattle part a bit later on, but yeah, Denver. So it's awesome to have you on the show, Ben. Thanks for making the time. And just to get us started here, why don't you give us a little bit of introduction of who you are? And we know where you are now, but who you are and what you've been doing and what all that stuff is.
Yeah, no. Again, thanks for having me on. My name is Ben Rogojan. A lot of people do know me as the Seattle data guy, although currently powered by Denver. Been working in data for getting close to 10 years now. Initially started in healthcare, so I worked at a hospital for a little bit doing kind of SQL Server, SSIS, data warehousing, and then worked for a healthcare analytics company, which was a lot more SQL Server, PowerShell, etc. But that company was focused on developing healthcare analytics products to sell to everyone from insurance providers to companies to help them, improve the population health of their companies. Then I did Facebook for a few years, again, kind of working in data engineering. And then finally, I've been consulting kind of the whole time. So recently, for the last 3 years, have been doing independent consulting and then a ton of content. So a lot of people probably know me from either my articles or my newsletter. So yeah.
It's a great introduction, and I think you mentioned one of the hallowed companies there, Facebook. So, I think a lot of our listeners wonder what it's like to work at a company like Facebook. I mean, what was your experience to work in a FANG type of company? I mean, you don't have to go into it in great detail, but
no,
what was it like?
No, it was a lot of. I mean, there's a lot of good things about it. I really enjoyed the people. The people were all obviously really smart, right? I had someone on my team who was like a PhD in computer science, and just a whole bunch of people who are driven and trying to figure out new ways to, better manage data, better process data, at least from the data engineering side. If you're on the data science side, trying to answer questions that are very niche. Obviously, there's parts of it that you feel very spoiled, like getting breakfast, lunch, and dinner is nice. I will say, as someone who works from home and has to do all that himself all the time, it definitely is just like that extra thing. But no, it was a lot of fun, a lot of opportunities to learn. I think it really forces you to think about the work that you're doing more, because you're you're not competing, but it can feel like you're competing against, 1,000 other people that are doing your job and are questionably, just as good, if not better. Not questionably, they are just as good and many times much better than you at your job. So you're constantly trying to figure out, okay, am I doing things that are worth it? Again, it's not competitive per se, but it's hard not to feel a little bit of competition.
Cool. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the data challenges you were wrangling with there?
Sure. I think what's nice about Facebook is, I've worked at a few companies now and then done plenty of consulting. And the challenge you run into at a lot of companies is everything from having to set up your data infrastructure yourself, dealing with data integration, right? Like data set A does not integrate to data set B very easily. All of these things. And a lot of those things don't exist at Facebook, at least not in the same way. The data is integrated, because the way they've developed the product, it's also kind of ground up, it's digital. There's a lot of benefits that you have there versus a lot of companies have like 7 ERP systems. None of them talk to each other. One manages, something on the manufacturing line. One manages something in a different country altogether, and you're trying to piece it all together. Again, not as much of an issue. And then even things like data size is very limited in terms of like who struggles with it. If you're on a team that has big data, you might have to deal with some of those issues. But I'd say a lot of teams there, the amount of compute that Facebook has is usually pretty sufficient. Honestly, a lot of the problems you run into tends to be like, am I doing the right work, right? Like, am I doing work that's impactful? And I think that's what Facebook really tries to do, is they try to remove a lot of the technical friction and make it more about, okay, but like, are you doing work that's actually helpful? Not, are you, solving a technical problem? Every once in a while, you would run into an interesting technical issue or something. I remember having to go through some people's pipelines, like some machine learning engineers' pipelines, and it was like thousands and thousands of lines. And that was a little bit hairy, but overall, a lot of people's workflows, I would say, are in many ways simpler because they've got all this infrastructure that they've set up, and they're basically constantly looking for ways to improve and reduce that technical friction, rather than like, hey, can you make your life harder? They're trying to figure out how to make engineers' lives easier constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I would guess in a place like Facebook, the data is pretty well documented. So if you're looking for a data set, then you can relatively well find it.
Yes, I would say that it's definitely like more, at least in my experience, like more it's better documented. There we go. It's better documented than in most companies that I've worked with. Some of it is because they kind of force it to happen. Like there is a forcing function where they try to like certify data sets. And by doing that, you have to like fill out a certain number of like the column descriptions. You have to describe the table. You have to do a few things in terms of like how to get that. But I would say it's definitely better documented. And it always made it easy for me to kind of like jump in and like, if I needed a data set, I could just easily search for it and find it.
Yeah. Cool.
I think that opens up a really interesting discussion just about data engineering in general, right? Because what you're talking about is a different type of data engineering, with a lot of those foundational challenges have already been resolved on a fairly long-term basis, right? So it's more about how can we present that and how can we build that to the user. But if you're not fortunate enough to work at a FANG in terms of that, the data being structured in that way, data engineering means something pretty different, right? So, like, what can you say about that in terms of the definition of, like, there's kind of how you handle data engineering and there's kind of foundational data engineering. So what are some of the differences there? Because a lot of our audience are based in the area of visualization, and maybe it's a simple thing to ask, but I think it's a good thing to answer, actually.
I think in terms, so you're asking, like, is there a difference between like foundational data engineering and what was the other one?
Yeah, so like building the foundation is different from using the foundation to build something else, right? So
I think that's a good way of thinking about it. There's the way I often view data engineering is like, you've got like that platform, so someone has to build and manage that platform, and in many companies that is the data engineering team who either has a data platform engineer or just has to do it, or has to pick a bunch of out of the box solutions that can do it for them. from there, then you kind of have to build what I consider kind of infrastructure still, but it's, that data layer that is your core data model, which represents your company's business as well as you can in, your core entities, right? Whatever your business might be. And that should hopefully, the goal in my mind is generally for that to change at a very slow pace, right? Like you don't want it changing so quickly that, anyone building on top of it can't rely on it. So I think that's why I usually also envision that as often infrastructure as well. Even though it's data, it's like, yeah, but it should be treated in such a way that it's almost like software or code, where it's like it's not changing so often that people can't build on it and rely on it. And then from there, you often have this next layer, and this is where like people often, I think, envision data analytics engineers kind of step in, or for most companies, it's just more data engineers. But the layer where you're trying to build that like business value and trying to build those business use cases on top of it. This might be directly going to an analyst or a data visualization engineer or BI individual to build on top of. But that's kind of the vision I have. And yeah, at most companies, you're likely having to do a lot of it yourself. If you're a data engineer, you might have to spin up your own Airflow instance. You might have to, set up and pick your data warehouse solution yourself. So it will depend at the company you are at. Most data engineers won't get to do it because someone will have already done it for you, but like you are the person who's having to kind of manage it. And if a problem occurs, like in your Airflow instance, which is the orchestration tool, it can often have issues that have to do with, maybe how it's set up, and you're gonna have to go figure out why it's down and why you can't even run your pipelines at the moment. So there are a lot of little things like that at Facebook I didn't have to deal with. At other companies I did. And I think that is one of the differences. And I'm actually kind of like writing an article a little bit about that, about like thinking about data engineering beyond Silicon Valley, because I think we read a lot of articles from Silicon Valley and see the cool technology that they have. And I think there are these aspects of other issues you will face outside of Silicon Valley that are oddly more challenging in some way. Even though, you envision like, oh, I want to work on these hard problems at Facebook or Netflix, and they are hard, but there are different problems that are also hard at other companies.
Yeah. What I often see there is that sometimes the problems, when you go into an organization whose business is not data might be important to them, but their main business is not data. You can find all sorts of tools cobbled together, lots of data silos, and that actually becomes a really hard problem to solve. Because you're going to look at what is the value of fixing that? What tools do I have? What tools do I want to invest in? Do I want to hire a data architect, for example? Do we need a data warehouse, or can we just pull data right out of operational systems? And these ones are, they're hard. I've never worked for a FANG or any organization that has a good data structure. Every single organization that I've ever been to has got messy data.
Yeah. And it's not to say that Facebook and FANGs don't have messy data. Of course they do, but it's definitely different. It's definitely a smoother process. Like I remember when I realized, I'm like, all I have to do is, for deploying a pipeline, essentially just put together a pretty straightforward Python script and then push it. Like the company I'd worked at before that, because it was kind of more of a startup, like the process of getting code to production was far more laborious. Like I was like, I got to write some release notes. I got to post them on this website. I got to like all these little extra details that weren't there anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that it's interesting you mentioned that, because I think breadth is an issue that we all face now, right? Across all technologies. It's not just a case of, okay, Python or you're good, or Power BI or Tableau and you're good, or Airflow and you're good. The reality is that you have to know a lot of these things. And how have you find, because I think for George and I, we find that has almost exploded exponentially on the layers that we work, that you have to have knowledge across areas rather than specifics to be able to handle a lot of the new tech. So how have you found that trend in the data engineering world over the last couple of years, especially with, let's not say AI too much, but, probably it's impacting quite a lot of things that we're working with nowadays. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of an interesting part, where it's like there's this expectation that everyone is semi-technical, right? Like everyone wants, or like the bosses, right? Like VPs and directors want things to happen, and a lot of those things that need to happen require some technical knowledge, or some technical work to get done. And so, there's always been a need for, tooling to kind of help people do it, but it is becoming more prevalent, right? Like, hey, it's just use these drag and drop tools and you're gonna be able to automate entire processes. I think you run into the same issue anywhere else with that, is that when you do that, if you don't respect that as code, like if you don't treat it like as a system that you're now developing that in the future can cause unknown issues or have unknown issues, there's a huge risk, right? Like, it's like, okay, I built 100 workflows that are all automated, and I run into companies that have this all the time, and they're like, yeah, but we have no idea what's going on. All right, and then the IT team's always like frustrated, because then they're like, well, the HubSpot team developed all these automated workflows in HubSpot. We don't actually know what's going on there. No one's testing it. They've just built it and they're assuming it works. And they're like, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And so that is another side to it that's always kind of hard. And it's always been there, right? I think the first time I recognized this was when I was using Tableau. And I wrote like an article back in like 2017. It might not even be out anymore, but it was like kind of the dangers of Tableau, which was just the fact that, I was realizing that, it's so easy to use. That's kind of its own danger, right? Like, I can just drag and drop a bunch of things. Anyone can do that. And now, are you putting the right data out there? Who knows? So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think governance is another area that we could get into there. But one thing I think that you've really touched on in terms of like that knowledge of consultancy, like already you've mentioned like Airflow, you've mentioned Tableau, which are in quite different areas as well. But also you talked about, how do you deal with like fundamental problems when they go wrong, right? And at some point, you're not the person that technically deals with those, but you're the person that has to orchestrate how those problems are fixed, right? And that's a different skill set to have. And I know that we've talked about this a little bit in the past as well, but it intrigues me how you found that part of it, moving away from like a little bit less technical to maybe understanding how teams of people need to attack these types of problems. So again, what are you finding with that, and how have you found that journey moving that? Because obviously if you've come from a FANG type of background, you'll be doing this all the time now, right?
Yeah I think that's kind of another interesting part of the world, right? Is you have to eventually start thinking about not just the technical part of getting things done, but also how do you operate teams and how do you manage them, but also how do you actually get things done and get the right things done. Mm-hmm. Because you can know all these tools, and I think this is the tendency many of us technical people do, is like we can keep scaling horizontally skill-wise. It's like, okay, we'll just pick up another tool, another data pipeline tool. Okay, great. Now we know 3 data pipeline tools. Mm-hmm. But in order to actually get things done in organization, you have to eventually start looking towards other skills. You have to be like, okay, how do I, get a team to, feel like they're attacking a problem together and making sure they're communicating, making sure they're actually pushing it across the finish line, right? Because if you let a team go at a problem, more than likely what will happen is they will spiral for, far longer than they should. Not in terms of like doing the wrong thing. It's just, it's weird how things don't get done. It's like the whole, like, I like to say, if you have a good project manager, you'll never notice. If you have a bad project manager, you'll notice. It's kind of was that thing. So if there's not someone to like say like, okay, now that we've gotten this done, let's get, X, Y, Z done. And making sure that the people are very like in touch with that and kind of know what's coming next and know what they have to do next. You kind of never actually move forward. So learning those skills and being able to like communicate, what the vision is and what needs to happen, not necessarily to get the whole thing done, but what needs to happen, next week, what needs to happen, the next week, where you're currently blocked, and how you're planning to get unblocked. All those little things really do, I think, add up to you being able to complete projects efficiently. Yeah.
So Ben, from a sort of data lifecycle point of view, where's your sweet spot? Are you in the sort of storing of data, the access of data, so the data pipelines? Are you in that last mile that you were talking about, where you're doing the visualization, the AI, and the sort of sexy part of it? Where do you sit in that continuum?
Yeah, I try to help, like, especially as a consultant, I try to be an end-to-end, someone that can help you set up your data infrastructure. I like to say, like, if you ask me to do a data visualization, I will do your traditional data visualization, which is like 3 to 5 metrics on top, a few charts below. So if you want something more than that, happy to find someone that's specialized in it. But that's generally what I will tell most people. It's like, I can do it, but if you want something really nice, and you have a vision of what you think, then we can find someone that really does that well. So that's usually how I view that.
Cool. And then who tends to be your clients these days then? Are you looking at sort of enterprise businesses, startups? Is there a particular industry that you're specializing in?
Yeah, definitely a lot of mid-sized companies. I think I get a lot of projects that are either people trying to set up their data infrastructure for the first time, migrating their infrastructure. So they're like, hey, we want to go from SQL Server to Snowflake to the cloud. Or the other thing is like, hey, we have a problem. And this could just be classic consulting. Like, someone set some data infrastructure up. We don't know what's going on. Can you come in and kind of help us, untangle this mess? So those are probably the most common projects I get coming my way.
Yeah. Good. And anything in the data migration kind of world then? You mentioned HubSpot, sort of HubSpot to Salesforce is and the data behind it. Is that an area that you would touch?
Yeah, not as much. No, I don't necessarily do the customer relationships system kind of work. Generally, I've had a few companies that I've worked with and partnered with where they usually bring me in on the flip side, right? They're like, hey, we're doing the Salesforce migration. Can you come in and help us do the data warehouse component of it? So yeah.
And tagged on to that, I'm interested to sort of continue on the skills ladder thing, right? Of being technical to being able to sort of team manage as well. And obviously, part of who you are, Ben, is like you've got your outward persona as well, who's pretty popular on several channels now, and you got a lot of followers, and you write a lot of content. So, like, that's another thing that doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. Like, they have a lot of knowledge stuck in here, both technical and consultancy knowledge, but they're either scared to show it or they don't know how. So how did that, was that like a natural transition for you? Because obviously all those followers didn't come overnight, right? That's a lot of hard work and effort and some decisions as well, I guess, how to split your career.
Yeah, I think, when I decided I wanted to start doing some more consulting, I think that was part of it. Another part is like, I just wanted to share and create content that I didn't have, kind of trying to get into the data world. So I think those are the two things that I really was focusing on. I was like, hey, I want to get more clients, and a good way to do that is to kind of share, who you are, share your skill set, be willing to kind of, put yourself out there. And then two, also just creating content that I didn't have, whether it was an interview guide, whether it was, just some basic initial projects or something. I think that was all helpful because about 10 years ago, there wasn't a lot in terms of like data engineering in like a single place. There was a lot of components of it, right? Like, you could read Kimball's book for data warehousing. You could, put together all these pieces, but there was very few pieces of content that was like, here's like most of what you need to know for this thing called data engineering. Now we have Joe Reese's book, who's kind of put together a good high-level view of most of what you should know. But before that, there really wasn't much in terms of like a data engineering guide or big picture kind of content.
Yeah, look, we'd love to get Joe on. Maybe next year. I had a chat with him, but he just ain't got no room right now. So, but
he's running around. I think I just saw a post where he was like, "I'm putting out no content this week because I'm traveling." So,
I think he canned his his regular like Monday morning podcast as well. That he did his little 15-minute catch up because it was just too much for him to do with everything else that was happening. So, but I think related to that, I think the social side of data engineering is just like exploding right now. I don't know what has happened, but like my feed, maybe it's just you, but my feed is just blowing up right now with everything to do with data engineering, and there seems to be a huge appetite to learn that stuff. So where do you think that sort of stemmed from? Do you think that's just a tech thing, or like some of the content creators have just like gone really explosive? How do you explain that?
Yeah, I think some of the content creators have gotten, they've gotten a lot of traction. I think you probably have a good portion of people who've become data analysts who want to get to that next phase in their career. and view data engineering as the answer, right? Like for me, you can become a high level data analyst and become super valuable to a company that way. But some people probably want or decided that, hey, you know what? I think data engineering is the way that I want to go. So I think that is some people's next phase. Everyone, there's a lot of good options, I think, in the data world. Again, you can become high level data analyst, you go into data engineering, you can go into some of these other careers and try to figure out what fits. So I think that's a little bit of it. I think there is still this need for a lot of data wrangling, right? Like everyone continually figures this out, right? In 2012 to like 2017, every company was like, we need to hire data scientists. And that led to kind of this like, wait, before we do that, we actually need to manage our data well. And so I think that kind of created that cycle as well, where people hired a bunch of data scientists. Many of those data scientists had to do data engineering work and weren't that happy. Some of them converted to data engineers at that point, right? I think Joe Reese is one of those. And then eventually, it became more of a career and more of an option. And, once people saw that, it is either something that they like doing or it pays well, they were like, okay, I think I'm going to put effort into this.
I think that's manifested itself well in terms of communities and stuff like that as well. And I know TFA is a big thing for you as well. Do you want to mention that for a bit? Because I've had a huge, that's had huge impact on me in terms of the people that I've met since I met you and then joined TFA, and that's made a few things happen. So it's super cool to have that community aspect as well. So
yeah. I mean, I've got a few communities. Obviously, one's focused on data engineering, but the one you're bringing up is focused on consulting. I just, again, same idea where it's like I want to create things that I didn't have when I broke into the world of consulting, which is like, more community. I think consulting in particular is one of those things that's harder to teach. It's not impossible, but it's harder to teach. You kind of have to go through a lot of the lessons yourself. But it's nice to have other people there and have people that you can reach out to and ask questions about, right? In that community, you have everything from people asking about pricing. They're like, I don't know how to price these projects. And, if I charge a retainer, what should I charge? And I think there's a little lessons along the way, like with retainers, where it's like, well, like for me, I have certain numbers that I wouldn't do. Like I'm not going to do a $1,000 a month retainer. It's not necessarily worth it for me to take on something of that nature. So, helping people understand like what problems they don't realize they're going to have if they try taking on 20 retainers, all that are, very small. It's like, well, you're going to figure out very quickly that that's all still takes up a certain amount of brain space, and it's going to feel like a lot more than you think. I think there's like lots of little things like that I hope are helpful to people.
Yeah. And what is the demand like now, Ben? Over your 10 years in the career, have you seen demand for data increasing? Or for data services, certainly like yours, is that on the up?
I think, in my experience, for me, yes. I think one of the challenges there is that it will probably feel different to different people. I think because I've put in effort putting out content, I have a continuous demand. I know that some people probably feel like, hey, maybe this year was more challenging. I've talked to some consultants who feel that. And, part of that is that if you didn't, some of it's just how life is. There's an aspect of luck. I don't think I'll ever give in to not knowing that luck plays a role. But on the flip side, I do think there's something to be said about there was a really high point, probably between 2020 and 2023-ish, where I think you could have just been a consultant and gotten to work pretty easily, it felt like, because a lot of companies had money. A lot of companies were trying to do data. A lot of companies were trying to migrate to the cloud because of COVID. And there was a lot of things happening. And so if you started consulting in that era, you might have come out now in 2024 if you didn't create some sort of system or method to gain clients or to attract clients. You might have come out now feeling a little bit like it's slowed down. So I think that's an important aspect to consider, where it's like, yes, for me it's fine, but I'm sure for some people, if you don't have something, either a network or marketing or a partnership with a vendor, you're going to be having a hard time.
It's interesting that you feel it might have slowed down in general, but then I wonder if especially in the UK, you've got some rules now where it's quite difficult to be a sort of lone contractor consultant, and you need to put a proper business wrapper around it. But what I'm seeing in corporations and enterprises is they're on the up and up for hiring but permanent staff in the data sphere. Lots of them are doing experiments with AI. And again, that's sort of putting pressure on them to get their data structures right. And again, it puts a focus on data people within the organization.
Yeah, no, and I'm not saying that it has slowed down. I'm just saying, like, for people, if you haven't, I think there definitely was more money going around where you could probably, open up a pretty large consultancy in 2023. People are obviously still investing. That's kind of almost my point. Like, if you've set yourself up and put yourself in a good position, you're probably reaping the rewards of those of those projects. But if you haven't, people are not. I think people are being a little more choosy and specific still. Where it's like, yeah, we got to do AI, but at the same time, we have a budget, right? And we can't take out as much money as we could in 2020 when interest was 1% or whatever it was. Now it's up at 5, 6, probably depending on the type of loan you're taking out.
I think tagged onto that as well. Let's not get into the AI conversation because that's been done to death, right? And ultimately, I'll just underline that by saying that most companies, they're just not ready for AI yet. Their data structures are just not ready for it, and it's silly to even get in there. And the companies that do start it need to start at 10% of what they're trying to do and get it right, rather than try and do it all at once. So I'll just sort of close all of that off right now, but I think it is fascinating though in terms of like consultancy prep, and I've had some conversations recently with people who have asked me, is this a good time to go into consultancy? And I think the answer, like you said, is it depends. It depends who the person is. It depends how hard they've been working in the background. It depends if they've got something to jump to, because there were times where you could jump and land pretty safely if you didn't have that network set up. But I think certainly in the UK, that's a little bit harder right now. But on the flip side, and I think that's what George was saying, if you're part of a consultancy that's already established, you're probably going bananas at the moment in terms of, being able to use that effort that you have within your company. I think there's no problem with that at all. I still think maybe this is a UK thing, right? Maybe it's not necessarily a relevant discussion. I think it's more something to do with the contract UK market that can be very, very sensitive because of various issues that go on there. But I mean, in general, would you recommend people to like stick their toe in the water of consultancy? And how do you like make that decision? How do you start? What do you think about when you're making that decision in 2024?
I'm trying to think in terms of like 2024. Well, I guess maybe could you rephrase the question really fast?
Yeah, sure. So like if you're thinking about jumping from like a permanent position to be a contractor or a consultant or to work in an area of data right now, what do you think are the biggest things that you need to consider? Or maybe what are the areas that you would target if it were you right now?
Yeah, I think for most people, if they're considering making this switch, I'd one, don't jump into it too quickly. I think you can always go slowly. I'm biased because that's how I did it. But I think a lot of people think that if they jump out, they're going to have more time, and if they have more time, they can land more clients. But there is kind of some natural cycles to clients and how people budget and things of that nature. So, building up a reputation in the space, I think is always good. So, you can always test out by posting on things like LinkedIn. It's a great way to build your reputation and to see, do people even want what I offer, right? Because maybe you're a specific type of consultant or a contractor, and you might not know, you might not know if you have anything that people want or not. But if you start posting content and people are like, hey, yeah, like I connect with that, that I do need help with that. I'd love to talk to you about whatever it is, Tableau, Airflow, certain types of tooling, maybe a certain type of audit you think, maybe, you're really focused on healthcare analytics. if you can start finding an audience, I think that's always a good place to start. I think that's kind of one of the benefits today of using things like LinkedIn or the internet, is that you don't have to go invest a bunch of time to figure out if something can work. You can invest a reasonable amount of time and figure out, hey, is there even demand for this idea or this service that I want to offer, whether it's a contractor or something of that nature. Especially if you're early on in your career. If you're later on, maybe you've got a network, maybe you've worked long enough that you can lean on that. I'd say that's where a lot of consultants I know actually focus a lot of their time, is they just have a good network, and that's where a lot of their work comes from. But if you're new, you probably don't have that, and so you have to find a different way to, one, build a network, but also two, to like show your skills and your expertise. So I think that's what I usually tell most people as they're trying to kind of break in.
Well, I think that's it's quite enlightening to hear, just because a lot of people that we know and we see watching the show maybe haven't done this before, and they don't know where to start. So to get the advice from someone who's been there and walked, to be honest, Ben, you've walked the walk and you've talked the talk now, and I think that'd be like a nice way to finish off here, is just to why don't you talked about Denver, you talked about Seattle, but why don't you let us know a little bit about some of the ways that we can get in touch with you, we can follow you online, because there are quite a few. So where can we get you nowadays?
Yeah, so I try to put content out, it feels like everywhere at this point. So everything from YouTube to LinkedIn to Substack. I think those are probably the three main places I put content out. If you want, you can also join the Discord if you're interested in learning more about data engineering. It's got like 8,000 people who just try to talk about learning more about data engineering. Or Brian, as you found out, the TFA has got a lot of good consulting content on it.
Yeah. Anything final from you, George?
Yeah. Keep it short, but Ben, tell me, what's your dream data stack?
I don't know. I try not to pick sides on any tooling too much. I think I've always tried to. I don't think there's like a perfect set of tools. In a perfect world, I think there is this future where you have some sort of open table format, probably Iceberg, since that's what everyone's going to use. That then lets you pick your your compute solution, compute engine that you want to pick from there, whether that's Spark or Snowflake or Trino or something of that nature, and then have some level of orchestration on top of that. I will always have a soft spot for Airflow, because I think that's where I started with orchestration. So something of that nature. It's not a perfect stack, but it's what works. I think that's an ideal world. Companies like Facebook have made it happen where, like, again, we could just pick whatever compute engine we wanted. Then if there was a better, if you had a better use case for Spark or a better use case for Presto, you could easily just select it and it wasn't an issue. I think that's probably about it.
Cool. I mean, you threw out some really cool technologies there, so thank you for that. We'll not hold you to any of these, though.
No.
No, but again, like it'll change in 5 years probably. So
yeah, for our viewers, that's not like a Ben Rogojan endorsement. It's not a Seattle big guy thing. It's just like we're just chatting here. And look, I think that's just like a perfect way to round it off, Ben. It's been, I can't believe we've locked up the timer already, but it's been awesome to have you on. And we're really looking forward to having a bit of chat afterwards as well, and seeing where we go with this. And we certainly wish you all the best with TFA and Seattle Data Guy and everything else that's going on. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ben, for sharing your 10 years worth of knowledge.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you. We will see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Look at that. We're back again. All right.
Trying to turn echo.
Someone's got the echo. George is pulling the grimace face like with him. So yeah. But I'm going to.
I've just muted myself.
Okay. No worries. So that was awesome, Ben. And something happened like during the interview, right? Which never usually happens, and that we got some pretty big breaking news, I think, right? So let me see if I can just share my screen, and maybe we can just have a very quick chat. about that to start with. So let's just talk about the first one if we can.
Yeah.
All right, so let me just see if I can just on the fly get us. There we go. We're all in there. So the very first one, right? And you were talking about Iceberg right at the end of the interview there, and it turns out that Qlik literally today have announced that they have acquired Upsolver. So what are your thoughts on that? Not to just throw it out to you, but I know you already scribbled a post down real quick. So
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Like everyone, I mean, with the Iceberg connection, everyone wants to make sure they have, have access to it. Because that's really what it's going to be about. You're going to want to make sure you have systems that can access either ingest data into it, like tools like Estuary or something of that nature, or have access to it from the sense of like your dashboard. We have an echo again.
I'm just going to mute George for now, okay? Because he's double echoing. Keep going, Ben. You're good.
So they just got acquired, and I think the more interesting thing, right? Like Rivery got acquired before the end of last year. Now I'm spacing on who it was, but Rivery also got bought out, and also the other bit of news is that SDF Labs also got bought out. So I think what's interesting is we're seeing a lot of companies kind of consolidate. I was talking to a VC recently, and one of the things they kind of mentioned, they're kind of maybe a little less interested in investing directly in like data infrastructure companies. There's just so many, right? Like if you ever open up Matt Turk's Mad landscape, you can't even see the companies, right? It's so tiny. So I think we're getting to a point where some of these companies need to start consolidating so they can, get more customers, also get the benefits from all these different solutions. Again, from Qlik's standpoint, right? Like optimize probably their ability to interact with Iceberg and also get more customers. And so I think that's what we're going to be seeing probably for the next little year or so. I think we've talked about consolidation for a long time, probably since maybe 2024, a little bit of end of 2023. And I think now it's finally kind of coming into, it takes time for the wave to actually happen. So it's kind of finally coming into itself. We'll probably see more of this, I imagine, over the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the other one there, which was DBT. And let me just see if I can share that one up as well. Let's see if we can get that up too. Yeah, DBT. There we go. So DBT Labs acquired SDF Labs. Now, I got to say, this is slightly out of my comfort zone, right? Because I'm a little bit higher up the stack than this. But again, you mentioned it. But anything to say about that, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, so for a while there's been some competition between, only recently, like between the transform kind of layer. DBT kind of set the stage somewhere in 2020. And then from there, we really didn't have, like DBT was kind of the tool if people were going to pick like, a SQL transform layer tool. Since then, a few others have kind of come about. So there's like SQL Mesh, Coalesce, which is more of a drag and drop tool. DBT and SDF Labs are probably the big ones that people discuss. So, we've now kind of consolidated down even further. So now there's only a few really left. And they all, I think, have very clear, differentiators where some are UI based, some are a little more focused on engineering, some are a little more focused on the analysts like DBT. My guess is with SDF Labs, the purchase, maybe they're looking for some of the benefits that SDF Labs has. Also just eliminates one more possible competitor in the future. So, and DBT is probably still sitting on a decent amount of cash, I imagine, since they had a pretty big round a few years ago.
Yeah. I mean, look, my very general take on this, right, is that the real push on AI right now means that a lot more companies are being created and successful companies are being created fast, right? To create a successful company, you don't have to be in the ecosystem for 10 years now. You can really blitz the market and be someone in 6 months' time. And that means there's a prerogative here on larger companies to swallow up the ones that are most important, because otherwise, like, you just get lost in the market. And you mentioned that overview slide, right, where there's 2,000 companies on the same page or something, and you almost can't see them anymore because there's so much just in the stack. And I think that is a big thing. And if you don't go early, you're going to get left behind, I think, is the other thing I was going to say as well. For these bigger companies, and Qlik have been quite good at doing this. I know we have a little bit of Qlik rep on this channel, right? But Qlik have been quite good at going early, just picking a stack and going for it and committing. And I think that's what's good. They've sort of seen the the stuff that's been happening with Iceberg and the fact that it's really hitting the market in terms of a publicity standpoint as well, and they've capitalized on that. So I think that's a good move from them as well. We got a couple of. I got a good friend of mine in the chat, actually. I don't know if you know him, Ben, but a good friend of mine, Dennis, who I know has been boot camping on a data engineering basis for the last couple of months now. If it doesn't include Iceberg, it's a nightmare, not a dream. And I think we saw that at reInvent and places like that as well, right? That if you're not on the edge of this stuff, you're going to get left behind so fast, because there's going to be companies just implementing everything there as well. I want to give George a chance to speak. He's looking a bit glum there on mute, but let's see if we can get you in a non-echo way, mate. So you can.
Am I still echoing?
I think you're better.
No.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to fix this for next time. I think I just wanted to make one observation here, and that is what we seem to be seeing in the data industry, certainly. Remember, we did on the Data Fix a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Databricks, and Databricks had just raised 10 billion at a funding round, which was as much as OpenAI and Anthropic put together, which I thought that blew my mind. Databricks is now worth 62 billion. So I think what we're seeing is, you're right. There's businesses are getting off the launch pad very, very quickly and growing fast. But the ones, there are businesses out there that just aren't getting funded. The smaller ones, they're allowing them to die. And it's interesting that we see companies like Qlik that have been holding on. I think 8 years since they've been taken private, and 8 years now they've been held by Thoma Bravo. So it is interesting. Data certainly is the industry to watch at the moment, especially for M&A.
So for all our viewers, I think you might be echoing again, George. You might want to just put your mute on. And for all our viewers here, this was like a super secret added bonus. It's like when you buy one of those programs, right, for $7 and you get an added bonus. This is your added bonus, is Ben Rogojan commenting on live acquisitions on the stream. So look, we really appreciate having you on, Ben. It's been awesome, both on the recording and here as well, to be able to chat a little bit about this too. We hope you enjoyed it too, and that this is a part of your podcast marathon in the next week or so, right? So we're just one of many.
Oh, but they're all different topics, so that's what's good. That's why I enjoy it. There's so many topics I enjoy talking on, and it's cool that again there's some announcements. Maybe in the future I'll start being able to get some scoops early, and then that'll be even more interesting for me.
Yeah, so because you made that announcement on this show, that makes us first in line anyway. Yeah.
Yes.
We'll see. Thanks so much, mate. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We just got a couple of minutes left, and we just have to get through a few things. If that's okay, you can stay on with us, Ben, while we just knock these things out. But again, if you enjoyed our, apparently we've got a new segment now where we comment on live news as it's happening in the pod. But if you enjoyed that part, don't forget to give us a bit of a sub or a like somewhere as well. Scan those QR codes. Thank you very much. We are super organized, man. We are on episode 4. We're actually on episode 4 right now. So there's the first typo. But for episode 5, man, we just keep getting bigger. We've got the head of developer relations at Slack. We've got Curtis Kemple coming on as well. And obviously, Slack tied in with Salesforce and Tableau as well. So, super exciting guest to have on there, understand a bit more about the Slack ecosystem. But I know Kurt a little bit. I met him last year, and he's a big advocate of making technology available to everyone everywhere. And he's going to talk a little bit about that story with us as well. And again, it's just an incredibly valuable guest for us to have on. We're just super humbled by everyone that is accepting us as well. So looking forward to seeing Curtis, and that will be exactly 2 weeks from today. That will be on Tuesday, the 28th of January. We are keeping you up to date every 2 weeks with the Data Mix. So all that's left really is for us to all say goodbye. I'll even unmute George so he can say goodbye as well. Thanks again so much, Ben. It's been totally awesome to have you here. Thank you everyone for listening. Don't forget to catch our next episode. George?
Thank you, Ben. I feel like I'm on the naughty step here because of my echo, but honestly, that's a really insightful podcast and a nice little bonus at the end. Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you all.